Hi, how is everybody doing? I ask because um, yesterday, Wednesday, I think it was the 23rd, was a beautiful day, and there's a lot in this. Um, Basically, so when I experience something, it's pretty safe to assume, based on things that have happened in the past, that we're on similar frequencies, overlapping in many places. So if I'm feeling it, then no doubt some of you out there are feeling it, but may not know why you're feeling certain things. So hopefully I'll get to this towards the end. It's a little exercise that will help you find where you are as much as who you are. We'll come on to that later. What I wanted to start with, following on from the previous video, but before we actually get to that, I want you to consider the radio. I don't know how many people use the expression these days, but it was often commonly referred to as the wireless, or what's on the wireless, put the wireless on, which has sort of transitioned into what's on the radio. But it's often today, when we say the word wireless, it's sort of taken to refer to technology and as if it is something new, but clearly wireless is exactly what a radio is. So what you have is a piece of equipment that suddenly opens up to things that your external five senses cannot detect, and it opens up a whole world, the whole spectrum, from something that is total truth to absolute lie, and an enormous amount of grey area in between. The parameters being sort of good and evil, as it were. It's like a book of good and evil across the radio waves. It requires an inner discernment to actually select and be selective on what you listen to. I'm sort of going off on a bit of a tangent, but so communication and power often involves a thing called a tower. Now, those towers and things can be wireless, like cell phones and devices and things. There's no wired connection, so it is wireless. But again, you have equipment to now open up doorways to information. The key point of this is that without that equipment, it's not detectable. And the power or the communication is from generally something that is a tower in this physical reality. So now to come on to the topic, think of war memorials. Generally they consist of something that is upright. It may be a casting of a brass cast of a soldier, or it just may be a simple, like an obelisk, shall we say. It basically forms a tower. At the base of that, generally there's a series of blocks, and on those blocks at the lower levels you will get either cast or carved, engraved, generally initials and a surname, all caps, if it's a fairly large memorial, it'll have basically what looks or reads like a list, like a column. So in this material realm, what that reflects is your all caps name is set in stone or is an engraving. And it's attached to something. Hello, Damiana. It's just jumped on my lap here. Not put me off, but slight jolt to the train of thought there. But if you look at what you've actually got there with a war memorial, you've got something that looks like an antenna. You've got a list of names, all caps names in columns. And to some degree, if it's carved or cast in brass on a plaque and set in stone, you've got a representation of like a tower block. And a sort of amusing thought came to me about it, that although your physical remains aren't there and you've become an all caps name, that by and large you'll be in maybe a town or located in a town or a city as that all caps name on that memorial, and by and large many people will just go by and totally ignore you. A few will sort of look down, and there's of course like an annual event, sort of Memorial Remembrance Day, and a lot of energy, collective energy, because with these memorials you have a collection of names, a collection of all caps names. Then you have at various times you may have people come up and do take notice, and they look and they're possibly full of more negative feelings from it. So I wonder, what does that memorial really do? I'm speculating because obviously I don't have, well, I do have the equipment to detect it. It's called intuition. It's been off the scales just lately. Really excelled and proved itself yesterday. I'm not going to go into details as to what exactly, but suffice to say that it's self-proving in the way things unfold. So right, towers and wireless, we've covered that. The war memorial. Ah, yes, now the next part. I was listening to the Archaics chat between Jason and Logan and I forget the other guy's name, Waters Above. And what I found particularly interesting was when Logan said about the younger generation being taken into a virtual world. I'm going to come back to that part, but just keep that in mind, because that is a play out of a story that is unfolding. I'll come to that more. But what stood out was when Jason said about this OFIS program. Basically, as I understand it, for anything in the last 7 years, if you were to put into 2 dates that you know of in the last 7 years, 2 similar events in your life, this will calculate and give you a date in the future when a similar thing will happen again, and so you'll be prepared to act upon it. Waters Above pointed out that there is a possible danger with the way that could be used, which I'm sure Jason and the whole Archaics team are very well aware of and will build in protocols. But this is the thing that really got me, was when he said there are 14 protocols. This is what I would call the Y14 program that is playing out. Numerology is going to come into this a lot in this video. Things just sort of become apparent to me. You'll find biblical passages talking about God is closer than you think. God is at hand and such like. Incidentally, just from doing a Google search, this stuck out. Just on the sort of opening sequence from doing a search on looking for the biblical passage that mentions about God is closer than you think. What came up was an entry by wordpress.com, and it's of Acts 17, and it's verses 23 to 31. There's significance in these numbers here. I'll leave you to add them up for yourself. So it's Acts 17, 23 to 31. And it gives like the first line or two when you open up on these things. God is closer than many think. The entry date is January the 17th, 2012, for this entry from this wordpress.com. And it starts, when Paul is addressing the crowd in Athens. Interesting, in Greece. Just thought I'd point that out. Anyway, so the significance of the 14. What could that be? You'll hear expressions, numerous biblical passages, the right hand of God, God is closer than at hand, and such like. And even people will use expressions like, don't worry, I've got this, all is in hand. But the hand, it is closer than at hand. I spoke about this recently on a video. It's what are called the phalanges. It's the 3 sections in each finger, which gives you the 12, and 2 in the thumb, which gives you the 14. If you know anything about palmistry, you'll know that certain fingers are linked with certain planets and things that also would come into this. The 14 is a 1 and a 4. So from that, the 1 is it's the physical expression, the physical body, but it's opening up to 4 that are inside. The 1 and the 4 also make 5 because it's referencing about 5 senses. So my ears sort of pricked up at that 14, and it sort of led on to a few other things as well. And it also shows, which I'll come to, how numbers tell a story. Right, where do we want to go with this? Yes, let's go to a biblical passage here. That it's something that is actually playing out, and it's the Gospel of Matthew. This is the King James Version, and it's Matthew chapter 4, and it's verses 1 to 11. You got a 4 and a 1 reference there straight away, and a 4, 1, 1 there. So just to read this. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. So, just in case anybody doesn't know anything about the sort of basic rules of numerology, a 0 is a nothing, so it's discounted. So you ignore those. You ignore the nothing. that leaves you with, instead of 40 days and 40 nights, that leaves you with 44. If Jesus is the one, this is what it's referring to here. The one with the 4 and the 4 makes a 9, which is a number that represents completion. So what this story is telling you about, there is a completion going to be taking place by the coming together of the one with the 4 and the 4. The 4 is a door, so you've got 2 4s here. When one door opens, another one closes, or the other way round. It's probably better. And I'll get on to a little bit later about there are some doors that shouldn't be opened. So that comes up in the little sort of thought exercise a bit later on. Right, so to carry on here, so we're on verse 3 now. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. But he answered and said, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. If we take this in a very sort of literal, physical sense, if you could appreciate, try eating a loaf of bread with no water. It would be very hard to chew and to swallow and to digest. I don't recommend trying it anyway. Then the devil taketh him up into the holy city and set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and saith unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, He shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands, there is italicized, by the way, they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And then Jesus said unto him, It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Again, you could take this in a very sort of physical sense. If you feel that you are the one, as it were, then I wouldn't recommend putting it to the test of throwing yourself off a high building. And there are such laws in this physical reality that just are, and it would be a bit foolish. Well, it's up to you, your free will, but personally I would suggest no. We'll get to the point of this in a moment. Where are we? Yeah. So we're on verse 8 now. Again the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and sheweth him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and saith unto him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then saith Jesus unto him, Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. What have I to say about that? Well, the strikingly obvious thing to me, not once does this Jesus Christ character in this story actually turn around and to any of those 3 questions and say, well, whose authority are you? It's almost like Jesus has accepted that is a god of this world, and it is even mentioned by name. It is called Satan. There's something I thought I'd point out, and also worth noting in this. They are 3 suggestions. There is no sign of any of this Jesus character being forced. There are temptations being offered. It says right at the start, led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. So it's also telling you the devil is Satan all in this as well. But can we see this in today's world? this story is playing out. How? Well, this is what Logan mentioned about trying to draw in the younger generations into the virtual worlds. I was shown this yesterday in a message. It sort of brought it home, and it's interesting what came out of that, which is to do with the thought exercise which we'll come to at the end. So, I mean, as I understand it, in these virtual worlds, you can do anything. And it would become, or is becoming, by and large, that world is far more glamorous, far more exciting. Now, possibly you could run, if you can do anything in this, you could run a potential future scenario. You could put characters into that virtual world. You could play out scenes. In other words, you could be running a simulation. I forget which channel it was that raised the point of when people say this is a simulation, the comeback is a simulation of what? Well, I feel to answer that is to look the other way. So if we're from this reality, we're going into a virtual world, you can then run a simulation of what may play out here if through algorithms or through judgments or weighing up of knowing another person, what they're like, how they're likely to react or respond, you could play it out in the simulation. So if you can see the relationship between the virtual world simulation and playing out this world event in that simulation, that I feel at least gives you an idea of what this is a simulation of and where things are played out. But if you think about this, if you are sort of tempted to go into a virtual world where you can do anything, is that not the same story of Jesus being tempted? Now, Jesus is the light of the world. Or is expressed as the light of the world. It is a very good lecture I'm going to link to by Rudolf Steiner from about 4 years ago, which basically will give you the way to find the light inside yourself. The head effectively becomes a sense organ. So you're making a rearrangement inside yourself, so you are coming from the heart center. As the way Rudolf Steiner describes it, you have objects, and you can recall an object, but what's not coming from the head is the emotions that come up that are then sort of blended with the recall of the physical object. I haven't really explained that as well as I'd like, but I invite you to listen to the Rudolf Steiner lecture that explains this perfectly. It'll help you find the twin suns, as it were. The perceived physical sun, and then being able to go the other side of the sun, as it were, from a material perspective. And then being able to see through the sun and seeing as the light and seeing where the shadows are cast and such like. there's a channel called Silas Speaks who puts this beautifully. You have the light casts in this reality illumination, but that illumination also flips over. It creates a shadow, and then the shadow creates a shadow. So what you end up is a shadow of a shadow of a shadow, which is very much this reality. Another way I could explain this is if we use Wagnerian terminology. So we look at the ring cycle, you have a central character in that's called Loga, the god of fire. Now fire has two aspects. Obviously it has its destructive aspect, but it also, you have the phoenix rises from the ashes, as it were, with the nutrients that the ashes create. It carries on a cycle, so it's a rebirth. So there's a creative side as much as there is a destructive side. So Loga has a shadow side called Loki. Loki is exactly what it is, because the key is in the lower vibrations, the lower chakras, the earthly realm. So this virtual reality, we're in a realm of duality or perceived duality. So when the contrast can be such that the natural external world can be so diluted and made so grey, it's basically what was shown in that Tavistock experiment, the group called the Beatles, and one of those cartoon films, you have these characters called the Blue Meanies, and they're sort of stamping out love and turning the world grey. They're the only things with colour. So there is this sort of shift going on of trying to pull people in to the temptations of this virtual world, making it look so much more glamorous. How do I explain it? I suppose the easiest way is just to come out with it. I can see the flaw with Ahriman. I can see the inherent flaw in what Ahriman is trying to achieve. But I also see that Ahriman is coming to a realization, coming to a pendulum swing that I could actually get Ahriman out of the virtual reality and bring it into this physical reality. It will happen. There will be no need for me to speed it up. It's that one door that you don't open. You'll see a lot of symbology of things like arcs of the covenants are always held out in a box. It's a Pandora's box. It's a huge part of you that needs to be firmly shut. Let's think how best to carry on with this. I'm looking at this has gone up to 28 minutes, so I feel I'm going to stop this video now and carry this on in the next one. There's some observations that I've made about passages in Genesis that I'd like you to consider, and then we go on to that thought exercise to help you find who you are. Let me just say that you may find it quite shocking, and it is also going to play out a biblical story right back in Genesis in this as well. It's another example that this is an eternal play that keeps playing out. So we'll leave that there, and I'll explain more on the next video. I hope this hasn't been too convoluted, seeming too disjointed. The problem is when things come, it just comes, and it's like a deluge of stuff that I feel I'm then meant to communicate. So we'll leave that one there until the next video.